Sylvanas, no doubt one of the characters that hated Arthas the most, sought revenge for herself and her people after Arthas sacked her city. Unfortunately for her though, she was not the one who landed the blow which had killed Arthas. However, she was present at the Frozen Throne directly following his death. In this video, we will go over those events. After the battle at the Frozen Throne, Sylvanas travels alone to the top of the citadel where she begins venting out her rage at the shattered armor of the Lich King. She kicks the shattered remnant, screaming at the top of her lungs, calling him a son of a bitch and throwing pieces of broken gear from the citadel. However, when she begins to calm down, she notices a figure at the Frozen Throne. Immediately she thinks that it is Arthas' corpse, which was placed there by the champions who killed him as a mocking reminder of the Lich King's defeat. But as she begins to near, she realizes that the figure is not Arthas, it is Bolvar. This discovery sends her into another frenzy. She begins pummeling the ice barrier surrounding Bolvar with her fist until a piece of the ice actually begins to fracture and crack. Sylvanas now had mixed feelings. She was glad that the traitor prince was dead, but she was also enraged that for some reason there was another Lich King. However, Sylvanas quickly got over this. What mattered was that Arthas was dead. Everything he had done to her and her people had been repaid with his own blood. With Arthas dead and her purpose fulfilled, Sylvanas begins walking towards the edge of the platform. Thousands of feet below, Sylvanas could see the spikes of Serenite. Although she knew that the fall alone could not kill her since her body was pretty damn resilient, she knew that the blood of an old god could ravage her body and even destroy her soul as well. She would finally be granted the peace of death. Sylvanas drops her bow, empties out her quiver, closes her eyes, and prepares to jump. As she is about to do so though, a group of Valkyr who had been enslaved by the Lich King plant several visions into her head. The first vision showed Sylvanas when she was young, when she was still alive, and she was in Quel'Thalas. She was putting her hunting gear on, getting ready to meet her fellow rangers, and everything about it was just perfect. The life that she loved, the life that was stripped away from her, she was watching it. She was remembering it. The second vision was much more brutal. Undead were swarming the woods. Her elven rangers were slaughtered only to be risen up into undeath. She was remembering the undead invasion of Quel'Thalas. One of her elven soldiers came up to her. "We have only 24 rangers up there. They cannot survive much longer. They merely need to delay them as we fortify the Sunwell's defense. They will die. They are arrows in a quiver. They're meant to be spent, if we're to win this." Was this Sylvanas being heartless and cold? No. This was her possessing a warrior's heart and doing what a warrior is meant to do. Or at least this is what she thought to herself. Finally, the last vision showed Sylvanas after she and a group of the undead had been able to break away from the Lich King's will. She stood there, surrounded by hordes of Forsaken soldiers cheering and shouting her name. They looked to her for guidance. Sylvanas, however, looked at them coldly. Thinking silently to herself, Sylvanas thought, "And so are all of you, arrows in a quiver, that I will aim at Arthas' heart." Did she still have that warrior's heart? She was cold, she was heartless. However, she was still the same in death as in life. Just as that vision vanished, however, Sylvanas found the Valkyr surrounding her. The memories she had witnessed weren't actual memories that she chose to remember. They were being pulled from her by the Valkyr so that they could know her and judge her. Fury overwhelmed Sylvanas. She yelled for them to stay back, stating to the Valkyr that she would never be judged, especially not by these undead abominations. With that, Sylvanas once again turned towards the edge. She thought of Arthas once more, how he was dead. She wouldn't have to continue being the leader of the Forsaken. She would no longer have to take command of an army of rotting corpses. Her purpose was fulfilled, and with that, she fell. She fell from the top of the Frozen Throne into the cold stone of the Serenite spikes below. The only thing filling her mind was the sweet promise of death. As she fell, she witnessed another vision. A vision of what would happen if she truly had given up. Stormwind was under attack. She saw Varian writing out prints and designs of the Undercity so that his officers could infiltrate it. Within Stormwind itself, bonfires were lit. Sylvanas became enraged as she saw that the Alliance were burning the corpses of her own people. But as she watched, she soon realized that they weren't burning the corpses of her own people. Her people were throwing themselves into the fire, taking their own lives rather than facing execution. Sylvanas became shocked. How could this be? How were her people so suddenly weak? The vision vanished and Sylvanas found herself in some sort of state between death and life. Surrounding her were the 9 Valkyr from atop the frozen throne, but instead of looking like the ghostly Valkyr that we see them to be in-game, they actually appeared at this point in time as they did before they had died. Living. What was that final vision? Sylvanas asked. Every life leaves a waking in its passing. That is yours. This is what would have happened if she remained dead. What would have happened if her people were leaderless and if Garrosh had complete control of the Forsaken army. Why are you keeping me from death? Sylvanas asked. To show you the consequences of your passing. I've made my choice, Sylvanas replied. Your people will perish, another Valkyr interrupted. Then let them perish. I'm finished with them. The 9 Valkyr then looked at her with sadness in their eyes. The lead Valkyr named Eliad then spoke. Sylvanas Windrunner, the oblivion you seek is yours. We will not stop you. The 9 Valkyr vanished and finally, Sylvanas felt herself fading, and the peace of nothing awaiting her. But it was not peace. Once she gave in, she saw basically hell in World of Warcraft. Dark spirits clawed at her, screamed at her, rushed her, and even through all of this, Sylvanas heard a voice calling. A very familiar voice. Arthas. But it was not Arthas as she had known him, it was him as a boy, forced to pay for his sins. This was what awaited her. An eternity of damnation and horror consumed her until the 9 Valkyr finally returned to her and approached her again. Their leader, Annihilate, explained to her that they needed her, for they were still bound to the will of the Lich King. The only way to break this enslavement was to forge a pact with Sylvanas. They would be free of the Lich King, but they would instead be bound to her. So long as the Valkyr lived, so too would the Dark Lady, which meant that this hell which awaited her would definitely be prolonged. Sylvanas accepted the offer, and a light appeared in the darkness. The Dark Lady awoke to see her body whole and 8 Valkyrs surrounding her. The final Valkyr, the 9th Valkyr, Annihilate, the one that had guided her throughout all of this, had taken her place in hell so that she may live. Sometime in the future, Garrosh is leading the assault on Gilneas. His plan is to have every Forsaken soldier bum rush a hole in the Gilnean wall which currently served as a choke point. Since the undead were so resilient, they could take more gunfire and melee attacks than any living being could, which allowed the Gilneans to exhaust their resources on them, while Garrosh and his elite Korkron would follow in behind the Forsaken and come in for the kill. For the Horde, it was an excellent strategy. For the Forsaken, however, it was suicide. As Garrosh gave his victory speech and called to his army to advance, a voice cut into the fray. Charge! Garrosh commanded. Belay that order. All turned to see Sylvanas herself challenging Garrosh. Garrosh approached her. Fury and rage enveloped his eyes, and while thousands of Horde soldiers shrunk away from him, Sylvanas did not even blink. Who are you to challenge my orders? Sylvanas lowered her hood, revealing her eyes with pupils red as rage and having in them something that terrified all those who looked at her, even Garrosh. I was once like you, Garrosh. Those who served me were nothing more than arrows in my quiver. I have seen the dark, I have walked the realms of the dead, and know that nothing you say or do will ever frighten me. Garrosh's wolf that he was riding on backed away, and the war chief finally sheathed his axe onto his back. Very well, Dark Lady. We will take Gilneas your way. The army of the Forsaken surrounding Sylvanas weren't arrows in a quiver anymore. Now, they were her people, and they were to be treated like soldiers. While she still lived, Garrosh would never send them to their deaths.